The biggest mistake most men make is believing that every attack deserves a response. It doesn't. In fact, some of the greatest losses you'll ever suffer in life won't come from what people do to you. They'll come from what they trick you into doing to yourself. Think about it. Have you ever noticed how certain people can completely ruin your mood with just a few words? A disrespectful comment, a passive-aggressive remark, a subtle insult disguised as a joke. Suddenly you're explaining yourself, defending yourself, replaying the conversation in your head for hours. Meanwhile, the other person has already moved on. Why? Because they achieved exactly what they wanted, your reaction. Here's the uncomfortable truth nobody talks about. The easiest man to manipulate is not the weak man. It's the reactive man. The man who must respond, the man who must defend his reputation, the man who cannot tolerate misunderstanding, the man who feels compelled to prove himself. Because every reaction reveals information. Every explanation exposes insecurity. Every emotional response reveals where pressure works. And once someone knows where pressure works, they know how to control you. Niccolo Machiavelli understood something that remains true hundreds of years later. People rarely lose power because someone takes it, they lose power because they give it away. One emotional reaction at a time, one unnecessary explanation at a time, one impulsive response at a time. The most dangerous manipulators understand this perfectly. That's why they don't always attack directly. They provoke, they bait, they test. They create small moments of pressure just to see what moves you. Because if they can predict your reaction, they can predict your behavior. And if they can predict your behavior, they already have an advantage over you. Look around at work, in relationships, in social circles. The person speaking the most is often revealing the most. While everyone else is busy expressing themselves, someone else is quietly studying the room, watching, listening, collecting information, measuring weaknesses, waiting. The truth is, power is rarely loud. Power doesn't need to announce itself. Power often sits quietly in the corner while everyone else exposes their hand. And that's exactly what this video is about. Not how to manipulate people, not how to dominate conversations, but how to become the kind of man that manipulators hate dealing with. The kind of man who cannot be rushed, cannot be emotionally controlled. The kind of man who stays calm while everyone else reveals themselves. And here's my promise to you. If you stay until the end of this video, you'll understand why silence makes people nervous, why emotional control creates authority, and why the strongest move in a power struggle is often the one nobody sees. Because once you learn what Machiavelli understood about human nature, you'll stop reacting to pressure and start making pressure work for you. Before we begin, write this in the comments. My silence is my advantage. Now let's uncover the psychological game most people don't even realize they're playing. Number 1. Silence exposes intent. Most men think silence means weakness. That's exactly why they keep losing. Because while they're busy defending themselves, explaining themselves, and proving themselves, someone else is quietly studying them. Let me ask you something. Have you ever walked away from a conversation replaying it in your head for hours? Thinking of all the things you should have said. All the perfect responses that arrived 30 minutes too late. Of course you have, most men have. And that's because the conversation was never about words. It was about control. The dangerous people in life rarely attack directly. They don't come with a knife. They come with a question, a smirk, a subtle comment disguised as a joke, or a casual remark that somehow keeps echoing in your mind long after the conversation ends. And the moment you react, they get what they came for, information. You see, every emotional reaction is a confession. Your anger confesses what threatens your ego. Your defensiveness confesses your insecurity. Your urgency confesses your fear. Most men expose their entire psychological profile within 5 minutes of pressure, and they don't even realize they're doing it. The cold truth? The person who controls his emotions controls the interrogation. The person who reacts becomes the one being interrogated. Think about the last time someone questioned your competence in front of others. Maybe it was at work, maybe it was a friend making a disrespectful comment, Maybe it was a woman testing your confidence. What did you do? Most men immediately start explaining. No, that's not what I meant. Actually, here's what happened. Let me clarify. The moment those words leave your mouth, you've already accepted their frame. You've entered a courtroom where they are the judge, and you're desperately trying to prove your innocence. But something fascinating happens when a man remains silent. Not awkwardly silent, not passive, not intimidated, calm, still, unmoved. Suddenly, the pressure changes direction. Now they're the ones wondering, did he notice? Did that affect him? Is he angry? Is he planning something? Why isn't he reacting? And that's where masks begin to slip. Because people reveal themselves when they lose certainty. They start talking more than they intended. They over-explain. They repeat themselves. Their confidence cracks, and their impatience leaks out. What started as a test becomes a confession. Watch people carefully. The manipulator fears silence more than confrontation, because confrontation gives him something to fight. Silence gives him nothing. No emotional feedback, no information, no leverage, just a mirror reflecting his own uncertainty back at him. This is why powerful men throughout history spoke less than everyone around them. Not because they had nothing to say, but because they understood something most people never learn. The less people know about your emotional world, the harder you are to control. Silence is not withdrawal. Silence is intelligence gathering. While everyone else is revealing themselves, you're collecting data. Watching patterns, watching contradictions, watching weakness expose itself. Because the man who speaks first often reveals his position, but the man who masters silence, he reveals nothing and learns everything. Number 2, control the pace, control the power. Here's something most men never realize. The person who controls the speed of an interaction usually controls the outcome of it. Not the loudest man, not the smartest man, the man who refuses to be rushed. And that's exactly why manipulators are obsessed with urgency. Have you noticed that? The pressure to answer now, the pressure to decide now, the pressure to react now. Because the moment you feel rushed, you stop thinking and start obeying. You stop observing and start responding. And there's a huge difference between the two. Think about the biggest mistakes you've made in your life. The relationship you entered too quickly. The argument you shouldn't have had. The text message you sent while angry. The opportunity you accepted because you were afraid it would disappear. Most bad decisions don't happen because you're stupid. They happen because somebody successfully disconnected you from your patience. And once patience disappears, power follows. The uncomfortable truth is that urgency is often a weapon disguised as an opportunity. The girl says, "So what are we?" The boss says, "I need an answer right now." The friend says, "Why are you taking so long to reply?" The manipulator says, "It's simple. Just tell me yes or no." Notice the pattern. Everyone wants access to your decision before you've had time to think, because a man who thinks clearly is difficult to control. But a man who reacts emotionally is easy to predict, easy to pressure, easy to steer. Machiavelli understood something most people miss. Power is rarely stolen. It's surrendered. And one of the fastest ways men surrender power is by allowing other people to control their timing. The strongest men I've ever met all shared one trait. They moved slower than the pressure around them. Not physically, psychologically. When everyone else was panicking, they were observing. When everyone else was demanding answers, they were collecting information. When everyone else was emotional, they were calculating. That calmness wasn't weakness, it was dominance. Because nothing frustrates a manipulative person more than realizing they cannot accelerate your decision-making process. Watch what happens when you don't immediately respond. When you leave a loaded message unanswered for a while. When you pause after an accusation. When you sit comfortably inside silence. Something strange begins to happen. The pressure that was aimed at you starts flowing back toward them. Now they're wondering, why isn't he reacting? Did I push too hard? Did he notice what I was doing? What is he thinking? What is he planning? the hunter suddenly becomes uncomfortable being observed, and that's where leverage begins to change hands. Most men think confidence means having quick answers. It doesn't. Quick answers impress people. Delayed certainty controls them, because every extra minute you give yourself creates distance from emotion. Anger cools down, fear loses intensity, and ego stops screaming. And once emotion leaves the driver's seat, clarity takes over. That's when you begin seeing things other men miss. The hidden agenda, the subtle manipulation, the desperation behind the confidence, and the insecurity behind the pressure. You start seeing the game instead of being trapped inside it. And here's the secret nobody talks about: a man who cannot be rushed becomes intimidating. Not because he's aggressive, and not because he's loud, but because he's operating on his own clock. And a man who operates on his own clock cannot be controlled by someone else's urgency. Remember this: pressure demands speed, but power demands patience. The moment you stop reacting on command, people lose the ability to pull your strings, and when they can no longer control your pace, they can no longer control your direction. Number 3, never reveal your emotional temperature. Here's a truth men learn far too late. People don't listen to your words nearly as much as they study your reactions. They watch your face, your tone, your posture, the pause before you answer, the tension in your jaw, and the slight change in your voice when a certain subject appears. And the moment they find a reaction, they find a handle, a place to grab, a place to pull, a place to control. This is why the most dangerous tests are rarely obvious. Nobody walks into your life and announces they're measuring you. They do it quietly. A disrespectful joke in front of other people, a woman taking longer than usual to reply, a colleague subtly undermining you during a meeting, or a friend questioning your decision with that look on his face. Small moments, tiny moments, moments most men dismiss. But those moments are rarely random. They're probes, psychological feelers sent into the dark. One silent question: what moves this man? And most men answer immediately, not with words, but with emotions. The irritation in their voice, the need to defend themselves, the urge to explain, and the desperation to correct the narrative. What they don't realize is that every visible emotional reaction is intelligence gathering for the other side. The moment someone discovers what disturbs your peace, they discover where your chains are attached. Think about that. The thing that angers you most often controls you most easily. That's why emotional mastery isn't about looking tough. It's about becoming unreadable. I once heard a saying, the man who loses control first loses the negotiation. Not because he's wrong, but because he's exposed. Look around. The modern world trains men to broadcast every emotion, every frustration, every insecurity, and every disappointment, as if constant emotional transparency is some kind of virtue. But in competitive environments, visibility creates vulnerability. The more people can read you, the more accurately they can manipulate you. And the more accurately they can manipulate you, the less freedom you actually have. And here's the uncomfortable part. Most men don't even know they're being tested. A woman cancels plans at the last minute, and suddenly he's writing paragraphs. A man questions his competence, and suddenly he's defending himself for 20 minutes. Someone ignores his message, and now he's checking his phone every 10 minutes. Externally, it looks like behavior, but internally, it's emotional exposure, and exposure creates leverage. The strongest men understand something different. They understand that feeling an emotion and displaying an emotion are not the same thing. You can feel anger without showing anger. You can feel disappointment without displaying disappointment. And you can feel pressure without looking pressured. That is where real power begins. Not when emotions disappear, but when they stop becoming public property. Because something strange happens when people can't read your emotional temperature. They become cautious. They slow down, they start second-guessing themselves, and the confidence they felt moments ago begins to crack. Why? Because certainty creates aggression, but uncertainty creates caution. And nothing creates uncertainty like a man who refuses to emotionally leak information. Over time, people begin treating you differently, not because you're louder, and not because you're more intimidating, because you're harder to figure out, harder to provoke, harder to manipulate, harder to predict, and prediction is the foundation of control. Remember this carefully. Most people are not studying your strengths. They're studying your reactions. They're searching for the emotional button that opens the door, the frustration, the insecurity, the fear, the ego, the need for validation. The moment they find it, they press it again, and again, and again. But when your emotional temperature remains steady, that button disappears. And when nobody can find your buttons, nobody can control your direction. That's when you stop becoming a man who reacts to the world and become a man the world struggles to move. Number 4, let them talk themselves into exposure. Most men walk into conversations believing the person with the best argument wins. That's why most men lose, because they enter every interaction trying to prove something, trying to sound intelligent, trying to defend their position, trying to control how they're perceived. Meanwhile, the most dangerous person in the room is usually doing the opposite, listening, watching, collecting. Let me tell you something that took most men years to understand. People reveal far more when they're trying to convince you than when you're trying to convince them. And once you see this, you'll never hear conversations the same way again. Think about the last time someone desperately wanted you to believe something. A colleague explaining why a project failed, a friend justifying a questionable decision, a woman explaining why her actions aren't what they look like, a business partner promising everything will work out. Notice what happens. The more emotionally invested people become in controlling your perception, the more information starts leaking out. Tiny contradictions, changes in tone, details that weren't necessary, explanations nobody asked for. Most men miss all of it because they're too busy preparing their next response. They're listening to reply, not listening to detect, and those are two completely different things. The truth is, silence creates a strange kind of psychological pressure. Most people cannot tolerate it. A few seconds of silence feels like an eternity, so they rush to fill the void, and that's where exposure begins. Have you ever noticed how a guilty person keeps talking? You ask a simple question, and instead of giving a simple answer, they deliver a 5-minute speech, then another, then another. Not because they're confident, because they're trying to regain control. What you're witnessing isn't communication, it's leakage, the mind under pressure revealing itself. And the funny part, most men interrupt the process. They challenge too early, they argue too early, they reveal their hand too early. Imagine a poker player showing his cards before the final bet. That's exactly what happens every time you rush to confront someone. You remove the pressure that was making them unravel. The powerful move is often the opposite. A pause, a nod, a calm, interesting, and then silence. Nothing terrifies a deceptive person more than someone who remains relaxed while they keep talking, because now they're trapped in their own performance. And every performer eventually makes a mistake. Watch carefully. The manipulator who was calm suddenly becomes defensive. The confident person starts over-explaining. The story begins changing. The emotions become stronger. The language becomes less precise. The mask starts slipping. Not because you expose themselves. This is why powerful men rarely rush to correct people. They understand something most people never learn. Time is often a better interrogator than confrontation. The longer someone talks, the more psychologically invested they become in their version of reality, and once people become invested, they stop being careful. That's when truth starts leaking through the cracks. A contradiction here, an emotional reaction there, a detail that doesn't fit, a motive that accidentally reveals itself. And here's the deeper lesson. The goal isn't to catch people lying. The goal is to understand them. Because every person eventually tells you who they are. Not through confession, but through repetition, through patterns, through the things they cannot stop revealing. When you stop competing for airtime, you begin seeing things other men never notice. You notice insecurity hiding behind arrogance, neediness hiding behind confidence, desperation hiding behind authority, and weakness hiding behind aggression. And once you see those patterns, power dynamics become impossible to ignore. Remember this. Most men believe influence comes from speaking, but influence often comes from creating space. Space for people to reveal themselves, space for masks to slip, and space for hidden motives to surface. Because the man who talks the most usually reveals the most, but but the man who listens with patience. He leaves the conversation with something far more valuable than attention. He leaves with the truth. Number 5. Remove the reward of your attention. Here's a dangerous truth most men never discover. Not everyone wants your respect. Not everyone wants your friendship. And not everyone even wants to beat you. Some people want something much simpler: your attention. And once you understand that, you'll start seeing an invisible game being played everywhere. Because attention is currency, attention is validation, attention is power, and every time someone successfully pulls your focus, they receive proof that they matter inside your world. Think about it. How many times has someone completely hijacked your mood without even being present? A text message, a comment, a social media post, a delayed reply, or a disrespectful remark. Suddenly you're thinking about them for hours, replaying conversations, imagining responses, and building arguments in your head. Meanwhile, they occupy space in your mind rent-free, and that's the trap. Most men believe power comes from controlling others, but often, power comes from controlling who gets access to your attention. Because attention is where your life happens. Your focus creates your reality, your focus creates your emotions, and your focus creates your future. And there are people who instinctively understand this. That's why they provoke, that's why they bait, and that's why they create drama. They're not always trying to defeat you, they're trying to enter your mind. Once they're there, they've already won something valuable: your energy. Look closely at human behavior. The passive-aggressive coworker, the attention-seeking ex, the friend who constantly creates tension, and the person who always has a controversial opinion ready to deploy. What do they all have in common? They survive on reactions. Your frustration feeds them, your defense feeds them, even your hatred feeds them. Because emotionally charged attention is still attention, and attention is still reward. This is where most men get trapped. They think responding proves strength, they think correcting every insult proves confidence, and they think winning every argument proves dominance. But often, the opposite is true. The man constantly reacting is revealing something: availability. And availability destroys scarcity. The moment people realize they can access your emotions whenever they want, your value begins to drop. Because what is always available is rarely respected. That's why selective attention is one of the most powerful forms of silent dominance. Not because it's manipulative, but because it's disciplined. A man with no control over his attention has no control over himself. Read that again. A man with no control over his attention has no control over himself. And the world knows it. Watch what happens when you stop feeding certain behaviors. The argument receives no fuel, the provocation receives no reaction, and the drama receives no audience. At first, something interesting happens. The person often escalates. They push harder, they become louder, more dramatic, and more emotional. Why? Because they're experiencing withdrawal. The reward system isn't working anymore. They're pressing the button they've always pressed, and suddenly, nothing happens. No reaction, no emotional spike, no access, and no control. This is the moment most men fail, because they mistake escalation for importance. They think, maybe I should respond. No. That's exactly what the other person is hoping for. Stay consistent, because effort without reward eventually dies. Every single time. And here's the deeper lesson. Indifference is often more powerful than resistance. Resistance acknowledges the attack. Indifference questions its existence. One says, "You're affecting me." The other says, "You don't exist in my priorities." That difference changes everything. Over time, people begin noticing something about you. You can't be easily baited. You can't be emotionally rented. You can't be pulled into every battle. And suddenly the same people who once tried to provoke you start approaching you differently, more carefully, more respectfully, because they've realized something uncomfortable. Your attention is no longer cheap. And when your attention becomes scarce, your presence becomes valuable. Remember this: the strongest boundary isn't built with words, it's built with access. The moment people have to earn your attention instead of automatically receiving it, the power dynamic changes. And when your attention becomes difficult to obtain, so does control over your mind. Number 6. Protect your information by speaking less. Most men have no idea how much they reveal about themselves every single day. Not through confessions, not through secrets, through casual conversation. A few complaints here, a few frustrations there, a little oversharing disguised as honesty. And piece by piece, they're handing strangers a blueprint of their mind. Here's what nobody tells you. The world is full of people listening for reasons that have nothing to do with understanding you. They're listening to map you, to predict you, to measure you, to discover what matters to you, what scares you, what motivates you, and most importantly, what controls you. Because information is leverage, always has been, always will be. Think about it. When someone knows your biggest goal, they know where your attention is. When someone knows your greatest fear, they know where pressure works. When someone knows what you're trying to protect, they know exactly where to attack. And most men give away this information for free. Not because they're weak, because they're conditioned to believe openness automatically creates trust. It doesn't. Trust is earned. Access is earned. And the strongest men in the room understand the difference. Look back at your own life. Have you ever told someone about a dream you were excited about, only to notice their energy subtly change? Maybe they started planting doubt. Maybe they questioned your timing. Maybe they laughed it off. Maybe they questioned your timing. Maybe they laughed it off. Maybe they suddenly became competitive. You thought you were sharing information. What you were actually doing was exposing a strategic position. The harsh truth is that not everyone wants to see you win. And some people don't even realize it themselves. Envy often hides behind advice. Competition often hides behind concern. Sabotage often hides behind curiosity. That's why careless disclosure is expensive, not immediately. Over time. Because every detail you reveal gives people another piece of the puzzle. Your deadlines, your insecurities, your emotional triggers, your relationship problems, your financial goals, your future plans. Individually, they seem harmless. Together, they become a psychological profile, a manual for understanding how to influence you. And dangerous people pay attention to patterns, much more than words. They remember what frustrates you. They remember who you hate. They remember what makes you emotional. They remember what makes you defensive. Then one day, when it benefits them, they use it. Not by accident. Precisely. That's why powerful men often appear mysterious. Not because they're hiding something. Because they're selective. They understand that not everyone deserves unrestricted access to their inner world. Notice something interesting. The man who constantly talks about his plans usually receives opinions. The man who quietly executes receives results. The man who constantly explains himself becomes predictable. The man who reveals little remains difficult to read. And what cannot be read cannot be easily manipulated. This creates something incredibly valuable: strategic ambiguity. People don't know exactly what you're thinking. They don't know your next move. They don't know what affects you. They don't know where your emotional pressure points are. And uncertainty makes people cautious, very cautious. Suddenly, assumptions become dangerous. Manipulation becomes harder. Pressure loses precision, because prediction becomes impossible. There's another benefit most men overlook. When you speak less, your words gain weight. People stop hearing noise, and they start hearing signals. The man who talks all day competes for attention, but the man who speaks selectively commands it. That's a completely different position of power. Understand this. Silence is not secrecy. Silence is filtration. You decide what enters your mind, you decide what leaves your mouth, and you decide who earns access, because access is power. And the men who rise highest are rarely the men who reveal everything. They're the men who understand that information, once released, can never be taken back. The less people know about your internal world, the fewer tools they have to shape it. And when your inner world becomes difficult to access, your position becomes almost impossible to destabilize. Number 7. Turn observation into advantage. Most men spend their lives looking, but very few actually observe, and that difference changes everything. Because the man who reacts to what he sees becomes a participant in the game, while the man who observes becomes the one studying the board. Watch carefully. The loudest man in the room usually isn't the most powerful. The most powerful man is often the one speaking the least, moving the least, revealing the least. While everyone else is trying to be seen, he's trying to understand, and understanding is where power begins. Think about how most men walk into social situations. They're focused on themselves. How do I look? What should I say? Did that joke land? Do people respect me? They're trapped inside their own heads. Meanwhile, the man who understands power is watching everyone else, not judging, not reacting, collecting patterns, weaknesses, motivations, contradictions. Because every person is constantly revealing themselves, far more than they realize. The insecure man reveals himself through overcompensation. The manipulative man reveals himself through strategic charm. The desperate man reveals himself through constant availability. And the weak man reveals himself through emotional reactions. The arrogant man reveals himself through his need to dominate every conversation. People tell you exactly who they are every day. The problem is that most men are too busy talking to notice. Let me give you an example. Have you ever met someone who constantly interrupts others? At first glance, it looks like confidence, but observe longer, really observe, and you'll often discover something else. Impatience, validation seeking, a desperate need to control perception. What looked like strength was actually insecurity wearing a suit. This is why observation is dangerous. It allows you to see beneath performance. And make no mistake, most people are performing. The confident businessman, the charming woman, the dominant friend, the charismatic leader, the social media expert, the alpha, the victim, the rebel, the nice guy, masks everywhere. And observation is how you learn where the mask ends and the person begins. The average man reacts to appearances, but the observant man studies patterns. That's a completely different game. Here's something most people never realize. People become predictable when they believe nobody is watching. That's when habits emerge. That's when emotional weaknesses become visible. And that's when true intentions start leaking through the cracks. A person who constantly criticizes others often reveals their own insecurity. A person obsessed with status often reveals internal emptiness. And a person who constantly seeks attention reveals a dependence on validation. The clues are everywhere, but only for the man patient enough to notice them. And patience is where observation becomes a weapon, because when you stop reacting immediately, something remarkable happens. You begin seeing moves before they're made. You notice who is preparing to challenge you. You notice who is trying to gain influence. You notice who becomes uncomfortable when they're not the center of attention. And you notice who changes personalities depending on who enters the room. Suddenly, manipulation becomes easier to spot, not because you became smarter overnight, but because you stopped being distracted. And here's the deeper lesson. Observation isn't only about understanding others, it's about understanding yourself. Because the more you study human nature, the more uncomfortable truths you discover about your own triggers, your own blind spots, your own weaknesses, your own need for validation. And that's where real transformation begins. Not when you master other people, when you stop being blind to yourself. Remember this, the most dangerous man in any environment is not the loudest, not the richest, not the most aggressive. It's the man who sees what everyone else misses, the man who gathers information while revealing nothing, the man who watches while others perform. Because while everyone else is focused on being understood, he's focused on understanding, and the man who understands the game almost always controls the outcome. Number 8, master the power of controlled withdrawal. One of the most dangerous things a man can learn is this: you do not have to attend every battle you are invited to. Read that again, because most men spend years believing the exact opposite. They think strength means responding, explaining, defending, confronting, fighting, proving, winning. But the older you get, the more you realize something uncomfortable. Many battles are designed to drain you, not defeat you, and there is a difference. The manipulative person doesn't always want victory. Sometimes they just want access. Access to your attention, access to your emotions, access to your time, access to your mental space. Because once they occupy your mind, they begin influencing your behavior. This is why controlled withdrawal is so powerful. Not because you're running away, because you're refusing to become emotionally available for manipulation. Think about the men who constantly find themselves trapped in drama, the endless arguments, the toxic relationships, the disrespectful friendships, the office politics, the emotional games. The pattern is almost always the same. They keep showing up, again, and again, and again, and again, believing the next conversation will finally solve everything. It won't, because some people don't want resolution. They want engagement, and engagement is exactly what keeps the cycle alive. Here's something most men learn far too late. When someone can predict your presence, they begin taking it for granted. When someone can predict your reactions, they begin controlling them. But the moment your availability becomes uncertain, the power dynamic changes, immediately. Have you ever noticed what happens when you stop chasing, when you stop explaining, when you stop defending yourself, when you stop trying to convince people who have already decided how they want to see you? Something strange happens. At first, they become louder, more emotional, more provocative, more aggressive. Why? Because the strategy that once worked has suddenly stopped producing results. The machine is still running, but the buttons no longer function, and that's where panic begins. Most men misinterpret this stage. They think the escalation means they should re-engage. Wrong. Escalation is often proof that withdrawal is working, because manipulative people depend on momentum. Momentum requires participation, and participation requires access. Remove access, and momentum dies. This is why some of the strongest moves you'll ever make will be invisible, not what you say, what you stop saying. Not where you go, where you stop showing up. Not who you fight, who you quietly walk away from. There's a level of power that comes from realizing your presence is not an obligation, it's a privilege, and privileges can be withdrawn. Without announcements, without threats, without speeches, without emotional displays. Just silence, distance, absence. Most people underestimate how psychologically unsettling that can be, because absence creates questions. Questions create uncertainty, and uncertainty destroys confidence. Suddenly people start wondering, why did he leave? Why doesn't he react anymore? Why isn't he responding? Why doesn't this affect him? The answers don't matter. The uncertainty does, because uncertainty forces people to confront themselves, and many cannot handle that. The deeper lesson is this: controlled withdrawal is not a tactic. It's an identity shift. It's the moment a man stops seeing himself as emotionally obligated to everyone around him. It's the moment he realizes he can choose where his energy goes, where his focus goes, where his presence goes, and most importantly, where it doesn't. That's what autonomy looks like. Not dominance over others, dominance over your own impulses. Because weak men feel compelled to engage, while strong men choose whether engagement deserves them. Remember this: the highest form of power isn't forcing people to respect your boundaries. It's creating a reality where crossing those boundaries simply costs them access to you. No argument, no revenge, no emotional outburst, just distance. And distance is often more feared than confrontation, because confrontation gives people your attention, while withdrawal takes it away. And when a man learns to remove himself without guilt, without explanation, and without looking back, he becomes almost impossible to manipulate. If you've stayed with me this far, you've probably started noticing something uncomfortable. The world doesn't work the way most people think it does. Most men spend their entire lives believing power belongs to the loudest voice, the most aggressive man, the most dominant personality. The one who always has an answer, the one who wins every argument, the one who never lets anything slide. But look closer, really look. How many of those men are actually in control, and how many are simply reacting faster than everyone else? Because reaction is not power. Reaction is dependency. The moment another person can dictate your emotional state, your attention, your behavior, or your timing, they own a piece of you. Maybe not all of you, but enough. Enough to move you, enough to influence your decisions, and enough to steal your focus. And most men never even notice it's happening. They think they're defending themselves, they think they're standing their ground, they think they're proving strength, when in reality, they're dancing to a rhythm someone else created. That's the trap. And that's why most men never become dangerous. Not because they lack intelligence, or because they lack potential, but because they never learn the difference between action and reaction. The man who reacts is predictable. The man who is predictable becomes manageable, and the man who becomes manageable eventually becomes controllable. The world is full of men who can bench press hundreds of pounds but cannot control a single emotional trigger. One disrespectful comment ruins their day. One rejection destroys their confidence. One delayed text message hijacks their thoughts. And one person's opinion changes their mood. And then they wonder why they feel powerless. Because power was never the ability to control others. Power was always the ability to remain in control of yourself. That is the secret hiding beneath everything we've discussed. Strategic silence, selective attention, observation, emotional control, and controlled withdrawal. These aren't techniques. They're symptoms of a deeper transformation. The transformation from a man who reacts into a man who chooses. And that distinction changes everything. Because once people realize they cannot easily read you, something shifts. They become more careful, more calculated, more respectful. Not because you demanded respect, but because uncertainty creates caution. The leverage they once had is gone. The emotional buttons they once pressed no longer exist. The predictable reactions they relied upon have disappeared. Suddenly, you're no longer operating inside their frame. They're operating inside yours. And that's where real influence begins. Not through force, not through intimidation, and not through manipulation. It begins through self-command. The ability to remain centered while others become emotional. The ability to remain silent while others over-explain. The ability to walk away while others desperately seek closure. And the ability to remain calm while others lose control. That's what makes a man difficult to move. And a man who cannot be moved becomes difficult to manipulate. Remember this. The most dangerous man in the room is rarely the loudest. He's the one nobody can read. The one who doesn't chase validation. The one who doesn't explain himself unnecessarily. The one who understands more than he reveals. He is the one who can walk away from attention, approval, and conflict without feeling the need to win. Because he already won the battle that most people never even realize they're fighting. The battle for ownership of their own mind. So move differently from this point forward. Speak less, observe more, reveal less, and notice more. Stop volunteering your emotions. Stop offering access to your mind. And stop reacting on demand. Let other people expose themselves while you remain composed. Let them chase certainty while you remain unpredictable. And let them burn energy trying to move you. And let your restraint do what arguments never could, because real power is silent. Real power is patient. And real power is invisible until it's undeniable. And the moment you truly understand that, you become a man the world can no longer easily control. Now, I want you to write this in the comments. I am untouchable. Not because nobody can challenge you, but because nobody can control you.